What most people misunderstand about the dark empath is this: they think it's a contradiction. Someone who feels deeply but hurts people deliberately. Someone who understands pain but uses it as a weapon. That doesn't sound possible, but it is. And it's more common than you think. You've met one before. Maybe you're still thinking about them right now. They didn't come across as cold. They came across as deep. They listened better than anyone. They understood you in ways that felt almost impossible, like they could read the exact thing you needed to hear before you even said it. And that's exactly why you let your guard down. Here's what nobody tells you: empathy without conscience isn't warmth, it's precision. A dark empath doesn't lack the ability to feel what you feel. They have it in full. They just use that ability differently. Not to connect, to calculate. They know when you're insecure. They know when you're lonely. They know exactly which words will make you stay, which silences will make you chase, and which small moments of affection will keep you hooked. Not because they're guessing, because they genuinely understand you, and they choose to use that understanding against you. This isn't about narcissists who can't feel anything. This is about something far more dangerous, someone who feels everything and weaponizes it anyway. By the end of this, you'll know exactly how to spot one before they get close enough to use it. Let's talk about what a dark empath actually is, because the term gets thrown around loosely, and most people picture it wrong. They imagine someone cold, someone flat, someone who watches you cry and feels nothing. That's not a dark empath. That's a classic psychopath, and honestly, those are easier to spot because something about them always feels slightly off. A little too smooth, a little too rehearsed. Your gut usually catches it before your mind does. A dark empath is different, and that difference is exactly what makes them so hard to identify until it's too late. Here's the psychology behind it. Empathy isn't one single trait. It splits into two distinct systems in the brain. The first is cognitive empathy, the ability to understand what someone else is thinking and feeling, to read their emotional state accurately, to know almost instinctively what's going on beneath the surface. The second is affective empathy, the part that actually feels something in response, the part that creates guilt when you hurt someone, the part that makes cruelty feel uncomfortable in your own body. In most people, these two systems work together. You understand someone's pain, and that understanding makes you not want to cause more of it. That's conscience. That's what keeps normal human interaction safe. A dark empath has one of these systems fully intact, and the other almost completely missing. They have high cognitive empathy, sometimes higher than average people. They can read you with frightening accuracy. They pick up on your tone shifts, your hesitation, the exact moment your voice changes when something's bothering you. But the affective side, the part that would normally create guilt or restraint, isn't firing the same way. So they understand your pain perfectly. They just don't feel bad about causing it. This is what makes them more dangerous than a typical narcissist. A narcissist is often self-absorbed to the point of being blind. They don't read you well because they're too focused on themselves. Their manipulation is clumsy if you know what to look for. It's about them, not about accurately understanding you. A dark empath doesn't have that blind spot. They're not self-absorbed in the same obvious way. They're watching you, studying you, and because they genuinely understand human emotion at a deep level, their manipulation doesn't feel manipulative. It feels like being seen. Think about what that actually means. Most manipulation fails because it's generic. It's a script that doesn't quite fit you. But a dark empath isn't using a script. They're using real insight into who you specifically are, your fears, your history, the exact language that makes you feel understood, and directing all of that toward getting what they want. That's the part that should unsettle you. It's not fake understanding. It's real understanding aimed in the wrong direction. And this is why so many people who've been hurt by one struggle to explain it afterward. They'll say, "But they really got me. It didn't feel like a performance." That's because it wasn't a performance in the traditional sense. The empathy was real. The insight was real. What was missing was the internal brake that should have stopped them from using that insight to hurt someone. Psychologists sometimes describe this combination as one of the more concerning profiles in interpersonal dynamics, precisely because it merges two things we don't expect to see together: genuine emotional intelligence and a willingness to exploit it. We're trained to associate empathy with safety. If someone understands us, we assume they care about our well-being. A dark empath breaks that assumption completely, and because it goes against everything we intuitively believe about emotionally perceptive people, our guard simply isn't built to catch it. So when you're trying to understand why someone like this can do so much damage, remember this: it was never about them lacking emotional depth. It was about that depth existing without a conscience attached to it. Understanding without restraint isn't connection, it's leverage. And once you see that clearly, you start to understand why the most dangerous person in the room is rarely the one who feels nothing. It's the one who feels everything and simply chooses not to let that stop them. Now let's talk about how they choose you, because this isn't random. A dark empath doesn't wake up and decide to manipulate whoever happens to be closest. There's a process, even if it doesn't look like one from the outside. It looks like chemistry. It looks like connection. But underneath, something more calculated is happening. The first thing they're scanning for is emotional availability, not in the romantic sense, but in the sense of who is open, who is easy to read. Some people keep their inner world guarded, even in casual conversation. Others give it away freely. Their insecurities, their history, what hurt them before, what they're still healing from. A dark empath picks up on this almost instantly because reading people is their strongest skill. Within the first few real conversations, they already have a rough map of what you need emotionally, and more importantly, what you're missing. That second part matters more than people realize. They're not just looking for someone open. They're looking for a gap, a place where something is unmet. Maybe you grew up feeling unseen by a parent, and you've spent your adult life quietly hoping someone will finally pay that kind of attention to you. Maybe you've been through relationships where you gave everything and got very little back, and part of you is still waiting to be chosen properly. Maybe you simply crave being understood, because most people in your life have never really tried. A dark empath doesn't need you to say any of this out loud. They notice it in how you talk, what you apologize for, where your voice softens, what topics make you light up when someone finally asks. This is why so many people who've experienced this say the same thing afterward. It felt like they knew me better than anyone ever had. That feeling isn't an accident. It's the result of someone paying closer attention to your emotional gaps than anyone else ever bothered to. And attention, especially the kind that feels targeted and specific, is intoxicating. It doesn't feel like being studied. It feels like finally being understood. There's another trait they look for, and it's one people rarely talk about: the instinct to over-explain and over-give. If you're someone who tends to justify your feelings, who feels guilty setting boundaries, who gives second and third chances even when your gut says otherwise, that pattern is visible to them almost immediately. Not because they're judging you for it, because it tells them something useful. It tells them how much they can take before you push back. It tells them the relationship has room to expand past a normal limit, because you'll likely absorb it rather than confront it. And this is the part that stings the most when people look back. It's usually not the people with low self-awareness who get pulled in the deepest. It's the ones who feel the most, the ones who reflect, who try to understand others, who default to giving people the benefit of the doubt. Empathic people, ironically, make some of the easiest targets because the very trait that makes them kind is the trait a dark empath knows how to work with. Your compassion isn't a weakness in general. It only becomes one when it's aimed at someone who has no intention of matching it. None of this means you did something wrong by being open or sensitive or generous with your attention. What it means is that those traits exist in a world where some people know exactly how to read them. And instead of meeting that openness with equal honesty, they use it as an entry point. The insecurity they find isn't created by them. It was already there, quietly, long before this person walked in. What changes is that someone finally noticed it, and instead of helping you heal it, they built a door out of it. That's the part worth sitting with. It was never really about you being naive. It was about you being human, feeling things fully, in front of someone who understood exactly what that fullness was worth, and decided to spend it instead of protect it. Now let's talk about what happens once they've found the gap, because this is where the real damage begins. This is the bonding phase, and it moves faster than almost any normal relationship should. Here's what makes it so effective: everything you're feeling in this stage is real. That's the part people struggle to accept afterward. The closeness wasn't fake. The late-night conversations where you felt truly heard, the way they remembered small details you mentioned once, the sense that you'd finally found someone who got you. None of that was manufactured out of nothing. A dark empath doesn't need to fake understanding because they actually understand you. What they fake is the intention behind it. This is sometimes called intense mirroring, and it's one of the most powerful bonding tools that exists. They reflect your values back to you. If you say you value honesty, suddenly they're the most honest person you've ever met. If you've been hurt by people who didn't communicate, suddenly they're the best communicator you've ever encountered. If you've always wanted someone who takes initiative, they start showing up in exactly that way. It doesn't feel like a performance because it's tailored so precisely to what you've been missing that it feels like fate. Like finally being matched with someone who simply gets it. And this is where real empathy becomes the weapon, not fake empathy. A person without genuine emotional insight couldn't pull this off convincingly. They'd say the wrong things, they'd miss cues. But a dark empath is accurate. They know when to lean in and when to pull back slightly, creating just enough tension to keep you curious. They know when you need reassurance and when withholding it slightly will make you work a little harder for their approval. This isn't guesswork. It's calibrated in real time based on how well they've already learned to read you. Something else happens during this phase that most people don't notice until much later. The pace itself becomes part of the control. Intimacy builds unusually fast. Deep conversations happen early. Vulnerable stories get shared sooner than they normally would. This is an accidental closeness. Fast intimacy short-circuits the part of you that would normally take time to evaluate someone. When you feel deeply bonded to someone quickly, your instinct to question them quietly switches off, because logically, why would you doubt someone who understands you this well, this fast? There's also a quieter dynamic running underneath all of it, the sense of being chosen. A dark empath is skilled at making you feel special, not in a generic, flattering way, but in a way that feels earned. They might tell you that most people don't understand them the way you do, or that they don't usually open up like this, or that something about you feels different. This creates a subtle sense of exclusivity. You start to feel like you're witnessing a side of them nobody else gets to see, and that feeling of being uniquely trusted deepens your investment far beyond what the relationship has actually earned in time. By the point this bonding phase is complete, something significant has shifted. You're no longer simply attracted to them. You feel understood by them, safe with them, and increasingly reluctant to imagine losing that connection. And that emotional reliance, quiet and gradual, is exactly what this phase was building toward the entire time. Not love in the way you think of it. Access. Deep, trusted, emotional access to you. That's what makes this stage so different from ordinary attraction. It isn't built on chemistry alone. It's built on real insight into who you are, used with precision, until the bond feels less like a choice you're making and more like something you couldn't possibly walk away from. Even if part of you is starting to wonder why that thought scares you as much as it does. Now comes the shift. And this is the part that confuses people the most, because it doesn't happen all at once. There's no single moment where things clearly change. It's gradual, almost imperceptible, which is exactly why so many people don't notice it until they're already deep inside it. Here's what's actually happening underneath the surface. Once a dark empath has emotional access to you, once they know your fears, your patterns, what makes you anxious, what makes you feel secure, that same understanding stops being used to connect with you and starts being used to manage you. The insight doesn't disappear, it just gets redirected. What once made you feel deeply understood now becomes the exact blueprint for keeping you compliant, uncertain, and emotionally dependent. This usually starts with small inconsistencies. The warmth that used to be constant becomes intermittent. Some days you get the version of them you fell for, attentive, affectionate, completely present. Other days, that same person feels distant, irritated, or subtly critical, and you're left wondering what changed. This isn't confusion on their part, it's calibration. Psychologists call this intermittent reinforcement, and it's one of the most powerful conditioning tools that exists because unpredictable reward is far more addictive than consistent reward. When affection isn't guaranteed, you don't relax into the relationship. You start working for it. And this is where their earlier understanding of you gets weaponized directly. They know exactly which insecurity to lightly press when they want you to try harder. If they know you fear being abandoned, distance becomes their tool. If they know you fear not being enough, subtle comparisons or vague disappointment becomes their tool. If they know you value being seen as reasonable and calm, they'll frame your valid concerns as overreactions, knowing you'll doubt yourself before you doubt them. None of this looks dramatic from the outside. That's what makes it so effective. It's quiet, it's precise. It's dosed carefully enough that you keep explaining it away. This is also usually when you start changing without fully realizing it. You become more careful with what you say. You start rehearsing conversations in your head before having them. You find yourself apologizing more, even when you're not entirely sure what you did wrong. You start managing their moods instead of expressing your own. This is not weakness. This is a nervous system adapting to unpredictability, trying desperately to create safety in a dynamic that keeps shifting the ground beneath it. Meanwhile, they rarely look like the one causing the instability. That's the part that keeps people stuck the longest. Dark empaths are skilled at appearing reasonable, even generous, even self-aware. They might occasionally admit small faults, just enough to seem honest, while the larger pattern of control remains completely unaddressed. This selective vulnerability keeps you hopeful. It convinces you that the good version of them is still in there, still reachable, if only you can figure out the right way to reach it. What makes this stage particularly damaging is that the emotional access they gained during bonding never really goes away. Even as things become harder, you're still comparing the present version of them to that earlier, deeply understood version, the one who once made you feel more seen than anyone ever had. That memory becomes the thing keeping you attached, even as the current reality contradicts it more and more. This is the mechanism at the center of it all, not cruelty for its own sake. Control, built on real understanding, applied just carefully enough that you keep questioning yourself instead of them. And until you can name exactly what's happening, it will keep working. Because the moment you can't tell if the problem is them or you, they've already won the only battle that mattered to them. Now let's talk about how you actually protect yourself, because everything up to this point has been about understanding the pattern. This part is about breaking it. The first thing to understand is that genuine empathy and calculated empathy look almost identical at the start. That's exactly why so many people miss it. The real difference isn't in how someone makes you feel in the moment, it's in consistency over time. Genuine empathy holds steady even when it's inconvenient. It doesn't disappear the second you disagree, set a boundary, or need something instead of giving it. Calculated empathy is conditional. It's there when it serves connection, and it quietly withdraws the moment you stop being easy to manage. If you want a clear signal, stop watching how someone treats you when things are going well. Watch how they respond the first time you say no. The second thing to pay attention to is the pace. Real closeness usually takes time to earn, because trust is supposed to be built through consistency, not through intensity. If you notice a relationship, romantic, platonic, even professional, reaching emotional depth unusually fast, that's not automatically dangerous, but it is a signal to slow down deliberately, even when everything in you wants to lean in further. Fast intimacy bypasses your judgment. Slowing the pace on purpose gives that judgment time to catch back up. Third, learn to notice when you start explaining yourself more than usual. This is one of the clearest internal signs that something is off. Healthy relationships don't require constant justification for having normal feelings. If you find yourself over-explaining a boundary, defending a reasonable reaction, or apologizing for things that don't actually need an apology, that's not a personality flaw you need to fix. That's a response to an environment that's slowly teaching you to doubt your own perception. The moment you catch yourself doing this repeatedly, pause and ask a simple question. Would I need to explain this much to someone who truly had my best interest in mind? Fourth, pay attention to how your confidence has shifted since this person entered your life. This is often the most reliable measure because manipulation rarely announces itself directly. It shows up as an outcome. If you were more decisive before, more sure of your own emotions, and more comfortable setting boundaries, and that has quietly eroded, something in this dynamic is working against you, even if you can't point to one specific moment that caused it. And finally, understand this: clearly setting a boundary with a dark empath will almost always be met with resistance because boundaries directly threaten the access they've worked to build. They may respond with subtle guilt, sudden vulnerability, or a burst of the same warmth that hooked you in the first place. This is not proof that you were wrong to set the boundary. It's proof that the boundary worked. Real change would look like sustained, consistent behavior over time, not a well-timed emotional response designed to pull you back in the moment you tried to create distance. This is the part that matters most, so let it land fully. None of this means you should stop feeling deeply, stop trusting, or become guarded with everyone who shows genuine interest in you. That would only cost you the very thing that makes you capable of real connection in the first place. The goal was never to feel less. The goal is to pair what you feel with discernment, to let your empathy stay open while your judgment stays awake beside it. Empathy without awareness is what made you findable. Empathy combined with awareness is what makes you unreachable. Because here's the truth: this entire pattern depends on, and manipulation only works in the dark, in confusion, in self-doubt. The instant you can clearly name what's happening, its power over you begins to collapse. You don't need to confront them. You don't need closure, an apology, or an explanation that will probably never come anyway. You simply need clarity, because clarity is the one thing a dark empath cannot manipulate. Once you see it, you can't unsee it, and once you can't unsee it, you're already free,